this is just the second of three little studies that we're doing during Advent, taking the Bible readings from Isaiah, which are set for the Sundays, for this one for last Sunday, and just looking at them in depth, and kind of asking the question, why are they chosen for Advent? What do they tell us? But also trying to link perhaps to a little bit to how other people read those passages, particularly how Jews read those passages, and whether or not we get the full breadth of understanding from the passages as Christians as we can do. There's probably more in it because of the way in which Christians, right from the very beginning, have interpreted Isaiah's writings in terms of through the lens of Jesus. But there are other lenses that you can look at these writings through, and perhaps you get some of the breadth by looking at that. Last week we very briefly looked at who Isaiah was, and I think it's a case of Isaiah pronouns they them, because Isaiah, well, we think there are at least three Isaiahs. Isaiah who wrote chapters 1 to 39, Isaiah who wrote chapter 40 to 55, and then Isaiah who wrote 56 to 66, and all at different times. So probably three writers, but then somebody else has edited them and made the whole book into a complete book, and maybe sometimes other people have inserted little bits here, there, and everywhere. So it is a case of Isaiah pronouns they them. And
it's sort of a joke, really. Could it just be that they're using William Burroughs' cut-up technique?
Oh yes, yes.
Just anyone who knows what I mean.
No. You explain it. Explain it, Harley. The cut-up technique.
He was just. I mean, as far as I know, what he did was he basically just he wrote a novel, and then he literally kind of got a pair of scissors and would cut pieces out and put them in different parts and shuffle them around.
Oh, okay.
So he was. I mean, as far as I know, that's what he did. I mean, I'm sure that there's more likely that there's three Isaiahs. So it's just
Well, there you go. But they certainly refer to events that are 200 years between each other. So 76, yeah, about 200 years between each other. So if they were all written by the same person, he was very old by the time he got to the end. But more importantly, in a sense, it's a kind of school of prophets. It's a school of prophecy, and then was clearly very important to the early Christians, who sometimes Isaiah sometimes called the fifth gospel. And there's so many quotations from Isaiah throughout the New Testament, although interestingly not the one that we're going to look at today. So shall we have a look at the passage?
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please. I need to find it. Yeah, can you see that?
Yep. A shoot, excuse me, sorry. A shoot shall come out from the stock of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. but with righteousness he will judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all of my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious.
I'm just thinking, I mean, maybe before we look at it, it's just worth saying something about what prophecy is and what a prophet was. Because we tend to think of prophecy as being fortune telling or, foretelling the future. But a prophecy could equally be about talking about the present or the past. And a prophet was a significant person in Israel and Judah. Prophet, priest, and king were the three important roles. The king was the kind of administrative person. The priest was the person who brought, the offerings to God and brought the gifts, the sacrifices of the people to God. But the prophet was the person who brought the word of God to the people. So of the three, prophet, priest, and king, we might think the king would be the most important. And if you're an Anglican, you think the priest is the most important. That was a joke.
Good one. Good one.
but actually, it was the prophet who was the most important, and the most significant person of the three, because the prophet was bringing the word of God to the people, but importantly to the king. And Isaiah was possibly a cousin of the king. Can't remember whether it was Ahaz or Hezekiah, but well, I mean, there would have been a cousin, possibly a cousin of Ahaz, that is, the king, and certainly a very significant person in the court of the king. So there you go.
Okay.
What you said about prophet,
yeah.
Martin Luther King, excuse me, is a very good example of that, because he's often called a prophet, and he wasn't sort of foretelling the far future, but he was effectively saying, if you carry on doing this, that's what's going to happen. That's what it's going to lead to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's really what Isaiah's doing, and the Old Testament prophets. They're saying, if you carry on living like this, well, actions have consequences.
And they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. I mean, we don't know what this little passage is referring to, and what sort of moment of time. There's kind of two possibilities. One is that it refers to what was called the Syro-Ephraimite War. You know that Israel had divided into two. The north was Israel and the south was Judah, and Judah is where Jerusalem is. So Isaiah is talking to Judah and Jerusalem. We saw that last week. But what happened in that war was that the Syrians, what is now Syria, and Ephraim, which is a bit further down, those two kingdoms united and invaded Judah. And the king Ahaz asked for help from Assyria, from this guy Tiglath-Pileser or Pileser, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, the third. And the Assyrians come ostensibly to help Judah, which is where Isaiah was, but in fact they conquer the north and invade the Judah, and 120,000 people are killed in one day. We read about that in 2 Chronicles. So that was, I mean, a big kind of event that Isaiah could be talking about here, or he could be talking about a later time when the kingdom of Jerusalem and Judah were destroyed by the Babylonians, and they were taken into exile, and the last king, Zedekiah, was assassinated. So in either of those 2 historical events, the monarchy is challenged. Ahaz is a failed king. He loses, 120,000 people. He completely miscalculated the politics of the day. And in the second case, actually, it's the end of the line of David. Okay, so we're seeing a situation where the monarchy is in crisis, and it's a nasty old time to be living in. Okay, so then what do you make of this then? The very first verse says, "Shoot shall come out from the stock of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots."
Sounds a positive start to me.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Who was Jesse?
I don't know. Who was Jesse? I was going to ask you that.
Wasn't he David's father?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
So, David is the line from which the kings were descended.
Right.
So a shoot shall come from the stock of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Just the image of the branch growing out of the roots, given that the tree is actually, I mean, maybe we could just go back to the end of the chapter before. Here, just the very last paragraph. Look, the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The tallest trees will be cut down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will hack down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon with its majestic trees will fall. So there's this idea of, God chopping away the trees, i.e., the people are going to be cut down, the tallest trees. So you get the idea here that the trees have been cut down, the branch, the trunk of the tree of the Davidic line has been rotted away, has been cut down, has been destroyed because of this violent stuff that's going on. And I think on Sunday in the service I said that the Semitic people saw the clan as a tree, and the trunk of the tree being the clan with its roots.
Oh. Okay.
So okay. So that gives us a kind of quite a vivid image, of how Isaiah sees it, and if you imagine him speaking in that kind of context, it says something quite strong.
Yeah.
So what about the next couple of verses? The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight should be in the fear of the Lord.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah. So
I'll go for that one.
So the shoot that's going to come out and the branch that's out of the roots is a person, yeah, and there are other passages which refer to, and the Jeremiah talks about. He writes, "The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he shall reign as a king." And in Zechariah it says, "Now listen, Joshua, high priest, and you and your colleagues who sit before you, but they are an omen of things to come. I am going to bring my servant the branch." So this idea of the branch, of a person, of a new king, a new ruler. So then we start to move into what are the characteristics of this ruler.
Yeah.
And the Spirit of the Lord. Can you think of other times when the Spirit of the Lord rests on people?
Well, I'm thinking of when Jesus is baptized.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely be a kind of a way in which Isaiah has been influenced the writing of the New Testament and the understanding of the New Testament.
There are occasions in the Old Testament where particular people have the Spirit for a particular purpose. And that's the sort of way I think it's phrased. The Spirit rests on them momentarily, almost as it were, to accomplish something.
Yeah.
Your friend Samson.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A good one.
Well, the judges, the judges,
Yeah.
And kings. David.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do you remember in 1 Samuel how the Spirit of the Lord is removed from Saul?
Yes.
So the Spirit is taken from and it's put onto David. So what do we learn? Yeah. So this new king is going to be, have the Spirit on them. And what are these 6 characteristics? What do we make of them? Wisdom and understanding.
Oh, it's an important one, that one. Gosh, yeah. Very important.
Well, we know what wisdom is in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I think much more profound than just knowing a lot, isn't it?
Absolutely. And understanding, well, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's so sad is that reading those 6 words, it's everything that our current government isn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No wisdom understanding.
Well, it sort of almost says to you that, I just gave you some historical context, but it doesn't matter, does it? You know, I mean, it could be, either when the Assyrians invaded, or it could be when the Babylonians invaded, or it could be any time in history. When you look at rulers and what they're doing and what you're hoping for from rulers and what you get.
The Jewish Study Bible, which I just remembered I've got, calls it a messianic prophecy. So in that sense, it's actually it's still a model for any ruler, but it's looking beyond any human ruler to the Messiah, the messianic figure. But it's still, I guess, it's still got a lot to say to us because this is the ideal ruler.
That's really interesting because actually it's got a kind of messianic content to it, but it's much earlier than the kind of concept of the Messiah of this person to come. It's interesting the Jewish Bible would say that.
Yeah.
Is there a link between the pairings as well? I'm just looking at it from a poet's point of view. So if you draw down the lines, do wisdom, counsel, and knowledge all kind of belong to one category?
Oh, that's interesting.
And then does understanding, might, and fear of the Lord belong to another one?
That's interesting.
Or the other way around, or they go parallel along.
Yes, I don't know. I mean, it's a question, but
Well, that phrase, the spirit of counsel and might,
yes,
the same phrase appears later in Isaiah in chapter 36,
right.
but the New Revised Standard Version translates it differently in 36 than it does in 11. In
Okay.
36, it translates it as strategy and power.
Don't like that.
Sounds very functional, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think in the context, it kind of makes sense. If I remember rightly, it's 36. It says, "Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war?" So it actually makes more sense to be translated as strategy and power in the English in 36 than it does in 11. But counsel and might sounds more poetic, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Does.
definitely. Yeah, we'll go for that.
I was only thinking that often understanding and wisdom are linked to fear of the Lord, aren't they?
Yes.
That's the starting point.
Yeah, the Lord is yes.
You know, and just thinking about what you were saying, Peter. Why is our government so rubbish? Well, they certainly don't have that.
I like the earthiness of having a shoot and a branch and
Yeah.
growing out. It feels so nice and earthy and down to earth.
Yes.
You know,
Grounded. Yes.
grounded. Yeah.
And the botany of it is quite good, isn't it? You know, I mean, you've seen plenty of tree stumps, which you think would be dead, but then you see little branches emerging from them,
Yeah, absolutely.
So out of a time of complete disaster, which obviously is writing in, that a shoot is going to come, a little branch, new shoot, something fresh, something new.
Surprisingly quickly sometimes as well.
Yes.
Yeah, those places have big fires and everything, and suddenly they come alive again, the trees and stuff.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And also, the whole thing is it often looks dead, doesn't it?
Yes.
Suddenly something comes to life. And the idea of a branch coming out of roots is an interesting image, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because roots don't appear to produce anything. But I remember when I was a child, we had a sycamore in our garden. The sycamores are really good at just growing, aren't they? They do it all the time. And I was always fascinated that even when Dad really cut it back, that we would still get little kind of branches coming out, literally out from the roots as they disappeared into the ground. And you'd almost get new trees starting to appear. So it is something that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is the fear of the Lord. When you read it, you sort of just think it should be, whatever. But if you remember the first chapter of Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yes.
So it's actually that reverence for God, which actually as a starting point for all your wisdom and your understanding, your counsel, your might, your knowledge, everything. If you start from that point, then your perspective on life and things is completely different. Yeah. Let's read on. Yeah, let's read on. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. Una, do feel free to come in anytime you want.
Thank you. Thanks.
So that's the description goes on. I mean, I rather like this man who's going to appear. I rather like this branch.
Yeah, me too.
The branch.
You could paraphrase the first two lines, just don't go by appearances.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Which is actually a very profound start, isn't it, really?
So easy to do, so easy to do, really easy to do.
And rumor as well, decipher what your ears hear.
Yeah,
People, you know, I mean, how much do we make judgments by rumors and gossip, by Twitter and, you know,
texts,
texts and WhatsApps.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing, of course, is the role of the king as judge, an arbitrator, a mediator in those kind of clan societies, right? With righteousness, with justice, you know, and equality, equity, for the meek of the earth. And what do you make that he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked?
That makes me think of Revelation. And isn't it a sword coming out of Christ's mouth at the end?
I don't remember.
Am I misremembering?
But I think possibly the idea is that, you know, a king would rule with a scepter and with symbols of authority, but this one is going to actually be able to carry out the function of this new king just by virtue of what they say, and their word is going to be enough. You won't need the badges of authority behind you to rule. I think that's what it's trying to say.
That kind of links with the Revelation idea. It says a sharp two-edged sword was coming out of his mouth.
Yes.
And that's the idea about his words speaking truth and truth separating, you know, good from bad or truth from non-truth. It's the same idea, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the belt around his waist and the belt around his loins, I think that's some kind of undergarment that they used to wear somehow or other, I think.
It's a rumor. It's a rumor.
Yeah.
Can't prove it.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, we get the idea, don't we? That this is a really nice guy, and
absolutely.
or woman. We don't know who he, you know, this king or is
woman.
going to emerge, or woman is going to emerge, but we don't know who it is.
Okay.
But the expectation and the hope is, and it's almost as if to say, look, the world is going to pieces, you know, but hang in there, you know, something new is going to emerge.
There's hope.
There's hope, yeah. And then you might notice that it kind of changes course quite a lot here. I mean, it's almost as if somebody has cut up the pages and shuffled them around, and a new little bit comes in. You know, the wolf shall lie with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den.
It's striking that it's the wolf living with the lamb, not the lion. Somehow we've got this idea that it's the lion and the lamb that comes from this passage, and it isn't. And I can't remember how we got that, but I know a lot of us.
Isn't that Revelation as well?
Oh, maybe it is. Oh, maybe it is. But I think it's surprised in reading something that it's not from Isaiah we get it.
Yeah, it is. It's in chapter 5.
Ah, right.
So again, it's another interesting. I've not quite noticed that before, Vaughan, how many echoes there are in Revelation of this passage, actually.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, Isaiah is laced throughout the entire New Testament, you know, the servants, you know, the lamb upon the throne, all of that. Yeah. But interesting that the juxtaposition, the wolf, the leopard, the lion, and then the child as well. But you've got then the lamb, the kid, the calf, and it's the domestic and the wild, you know, and the people's relationship with the domestic animal was completely different to the relationship with the wild. You know. Question, yeah, I mean, it says that the wolf shall live, shall dwell with the lamb. It suggests the wolf has to move. I don't know. I mean, what one thought is that they could represent nations. That it's talking about harmoniousness between nations. In Isaiah 5 and other prophecies, they sometimes use the metaphor of a wild animal in relationship to a nation. So, talking about foreign invaders, Isaiah says their roaring is like a lion, like young lions they roar. They growl and seize their prey, they carry it off and no one rescues. You know. Or it could be an allusion to Eden, to paradise, to this kind of primeval era of animal peace. Or it could be, I mean, we might want to look at it much more in relationship to eco-theology now, and see it about harmonious relationships within creation, and that it isn't just the warring nations that have to be pacified, but it's creation itself which needs to be pacified.
And looking after animals does too.
I mean, that I think has become a key passage for eco-theology.
Yeah, it's a lovely passage in a way, and you hear it, and you think, oh, that's lovely, don't you?
Yeah,
It's comforting. Is that a poem? Neil? Is it a poem, Neil? Is it a poem?
Well, I would say it's got a regular rhythm to it. Yeah, it certainly reads like a poem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. The holy mountain, of course, is Jerusalem. So the earth will be full of the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. That's another beautiful little good image, isn't it? You know. And it's the earth that is covered. It's not just Judah. He's not just thinking about, you know, his own particular situation and country and territory, but you know, the whole of the humanity, the whole of the earth. And then the last verse: on that day, the root of Jesse shall stand.
And that's in parallel with what we read last week, because again, it's this idea that Israel is an example to the rest of the world, and that justice and peace come from there as a source, but to everybody, not just to one nation.
Yeah. So I mean, the reading is there for second Sunday of Advent, you know, because it's seen as by Christians as a messianic passage. But when you read it the way we've read it, you know, looking at it in an immediate historical situation, it isn't quite a messianic passage, but it's on the way to being one. It's a sort of starting point for the development of the idea of the Messiah. But there are no New Testament references to Isaiah chapter 11. But there are some references in early Christian writings. And interestingly, I mean, don't want to be too technical, but there's a translation of the Bible into Latin called the Vulgate, and the word for branch there is virga. That's the Latin word for branch, and it's translated as virga in the Latin version of the Bible. And that's very close to another word, which is virgin.
Mm-hmm.
So St. Ambrose makes this connection, and I'll just go on to the PowerPoint now. No, I need to stop sharing, and I need to start sharing again. And we go to slideshow. Well, we do slideshow, and then we go from the beginning, and I miss out there. St. Ambrose said this, taking that idea. He wrote, as also in Isaiah it is written, there will come forth a rod out of the root of Jesse, and a flower will grow from its roots. Which isn't what Isaiah says. It says a branch shall grow out of his roots. Okay?
Yeah.
The root is the family of the Jews. The rod is Mary, and the flower is Christ. When he blossoms in our land, makes fragrant the field of the soul, and flourishes in his church, we can no longer fear the cold or rain, but only anticipate the day of judgment. So something quite significant has happened just by that little shift and connection of the word. That the shoot, that comes from the root is the rod is Mary, who of course gives birth to Christ. Mary, of course, is seen as the shoot from Jesse, in the Davidic line.
But what's the justification for that? Because David is Joseph's ancestor.
Yes, I mean I don't know.
Mary's ancestors.
Yeah,
So this is where I get really confused, because Joseph isn't really Jesus's dad. We follow the narrative, and I find this problematic because Mary comes from a different line.
I can't speak on behalf of St. Ambrose.
I want to have a chat with him because I don't get it.
But
I'm trying to find. You've got the genealogy at the beginning of Matthew, which was Joseph's line. I'm trying to find where Mary's genealogy is.
I think you'd need to look at the infancy gospel of James.
Right.
Don't ask me to quote it, but in the infancy gospel of James, there's a whole load of stuff about Mary and how she was working, in the temple and so on.
Right. Okay. Well, then that makes sense.
So these will be stuff that doesn't get into the New Testament, but was floating around.
It's in the Apocrypha.
Well, I mean, not even in the Apocrypha.
It's that fringe.
It's fake news. It's fake news. It's fake news.
well, it just wasn't seen as being sufficiently authentic or reliable to get into the canon of Scripture, but it was certainly on the cards. And infancy gospel of James, if you read it, is really interesting. Yeah.
Okay, I need to do that because I've always found this bit confusing.
I mean, thinking of Ambrose's mindset, I think if you take it as allegory as he does, then it doesn't actually matter whether there's a logic.
No, okay, well that's fair enough. No, I get that. Yeah, and I can go with that, but it sometimes seems in the evangelical church a bit of a leap that kind of ignores this. And kind of goes, well, he literally is the son of David. Well, no, he isn't.
No.
He isn't literally. I can get the metaphorical meaning, of course, absolutely. I'm happy with that. But if you're going to pursue the literal argument, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with allegory. I don't think a lot of people today realize the difference between allegorical and metaphorical statements and literal statements.
Oh, tell me about it, Peter. Yes.
I know.
So I spent my life trying to deal with.
Ambrose. I mean, I suspect Ambrose was sophisticated enough. Hopefully.
Yes. Okay. I believe he would be.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to dig that out for him. That's really good. Yeah. I'm going to look for that. Thank you.
But the other thing that comes from the Septuagint, which is a translation from Greek, isn't it? No. Translation into Greek is that it adds, in that passage, it adds another characteristic. So as well as the 6 that we've got, the counsel of might and fear of the Lord and knowledge and wisdom, all that, it adds a 7th, which is piety or godliness. So there are actually 7 spiritual attributes in the Septuagint.
Right.
And you can go to Revelation now, Neil. Chapter 4, verse 5, there are 7 spirits of God.
Yes, yes.
So in Christian art, you will see the figure of Christ with 7 doves around, which is, Ambrose, Augustine, Gregory, they saw these spirits, and it's portrayed in Christian art. And so this chapter 11 then becomes an understanding of the Holy Spirit as it dwells in Jesus and in the baptized Christians. It takes on a really different kind of characteristic. And another in the Targum, which is a translation from Hebrew into Aramaic in the 2nd century before Christ, the Jewish translation adds a little passage just before, the lion shall lie with the lamb and all the rest of it. And this is like, in the days of the Messiah of Israel shall peace increase in the land. So by the 2nd century BC, this has become seen as a messianic peace by Jews. And in verse 11, it adds, and a king shall come forth from the sons of Jesse, and the Messiah shall be exalted from the son of his sons. So by the 2nd century, in Jewish writing, nothing to do with Christians, the passage has also become a kind of messianic passage. But I just want to kind of just finish with just looking at this.
Okay.
It's in Chartres Cathedral in France, and I pity we can't get close to it, but it's a Jesse tree.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And
yes.
Simple, you're going up the tree from Mary, up through various characters. No, sorry, not Mary. Starting at the bottom, you get Jesse, the father of David, who's sleeping. I don't know why he's sleeping. And the tree emerges from his side, you can see. And then as you go up, there are various kings. There's the Virgin Mary there, and Christ at the top. And these very typical medieval kind of things. Then sort of, so there, you see that Mary becomes very significant in this line of David. Now, why we have to do some research and look at Wikipedia when we go offline. But the tree grows from Jesse to Jesus. This is the emphasizes the Davidic messiahship of Christianity, and that's the top. And you see at the top the seven doves around.
Is that stained glass window phone?
It's a stained glass window, yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
There are a lot of them around, I think, in medieval churches. But do you sort of see the problem that there's one line from Isaiah's writing, Jesse, which goes directly to Jesus, and no one in between. Nothing. There's one path to one place, and that is kind of problematic for our relationship with Jewish people in terms of holding that scripture in common, holding Isaiah 11 in common with each other. we've almost we've excluded the possibility, that anybody who does not accept Christ is excluded from this direct line, and the possibility of a peaceful kingdom, where the wolf lives with the lamb, is only possible through the coming of Christ, and that, although we might feel that is a really strong thing to say, and it might be what we believe about Jesus, it does create a separation and a barrier between us and other people.
And I remember this time last year, we had that speaker from the Jewish community saying,
oh yes, he was good. He was really good. Sorry.
Desire, and you think that that's still very much alive in Judaism today. And who are we to say, well, Messiah's come, sorry folks, you've missed it.
That's right, sorry. You were asleep like Jesse.
Every Christmas, a lot of carol services I go to, we seem to imply that.
Yes.
The readings are couched and everything. It's all sort of, well, here we are, we've got it all sewn up. And
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
I noticed very interestingly, being in Islington last weekend, I noticed they're lighting the Hanukkah candle on the same day as the carol service.
Same day, yes. We have the rival of the banners, and we have our banner on one side of the road, and theirs on the other. Doesn't reflect too well on interfaith relationship,
Oh gosh.
But interesting that the Jews read this passage on the last day of Passover.
Yeah.
And the reason being that they actually read from chapter 10, verse 32, and they read through right to chapter 12, verse 6. And either side of this chapter 11 are references to the Passover. So according to, I'll just read chapter 10, 32 to 34. This very day he will halt at Nob, he will shake his fist at the mount of daughter Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Look, the sovereign, the Lord of hosts, will lock the boughs with terrifying power. As I read before, the tallest trees will be cut down and the lofty will be brought low. He will hack down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon with its majestic trees will fall. Now, the reason that's a reference to the Passover is because this Assyrian ruler Sennacherib, when he came to conquer Judah, he was doing very well, but actually it says the angel of the Lord smote the Assyrians, and they had to go home because something affected them, and a lot of them died. So whatever it was, the Judah was rescued because the angel of the Lord passed over them. This is another one for your reading the Bible responsibly passages.
Yes.
But so that is, it feels like a reference to the Passover. That was supposed to have happened, that event, that rescuing, that saving, deliverance of Israel from Sennacherib happened on the Passover night. And then afterwards, I think that the passage that follows it talks about Egypt, and in the end it says, so that as there was, in the end it says, so there will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that's left of his people, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt.
Right.
So the passage is for the Jewish lectionary, the Jewish reading, it's less important than the actual remembrance of the Passover and the deliverance. Where do you think that takes us? I mean, I just thought, I mean, it's looking at a passage in depth. I mean, I just wonder what it says for us about leadership, in the public square. What is the vision confined just to Jewish messianic expectations and Christian assertions? Does it apply to anybody else? Does the imagery of the animal kingdom, does that offer something? are there warnings in the passage, you know, I mean, that we might overemphasize, you know, our heritage?
I think for me, it goes back to what I'm struggling with, and what Peter kind of highlights as well. The allegory in the passage is the most important thing, and we limit it as soon as we start looking for the literal, which is where we struggle, and we kind of then crowbar it into something that fits our narrative, but isn't really what this is about at all. And there's something I do with students at GCSE level. It's on their syllabus called The Danger of a Single Story. And it's all about, if you've just got one narrative for what you think, what you believe about anything or anybody, that's incredibly dangerous, because then you've limited your understanding, and that's where abuse and so on comes in, you know, that's where racism and all sorts of prejudice comes in. And I think the same is true here. We've given it one narrative. Certainly certain wings of the church have given it one narrative. And that's not what this passage seems to say to me at all. There are so many things around it that we've lost the beauty of. You know, the speaker, it's a TED talk, this thing, but given by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who's from Nigeria originally, and at the end of it, she talks about Alice Walker, and she talks about a multiplicity of stories, and she said, when you allow for the multiplicity of stories, a paradise is regained. And I love that image. It's lovely and ambiguous, because it can mean so many things, which is her point, I'm sure. And that's true here. There's a paradise in this.
And that means it's okay, and it's absolutely right for Christians to identify Jesus.
Yes,
this passage.
absolutely.
It's absolutely right to do that, because we can see in the beauty of this passage, the beauty of our Saviour. You know, I mean, we can see that, and we can connect that. But shouldn't let it disconnect us from people who don't see the same thing.
I mean, it makes me think of the tantric tradition, and all that you explore in that, in terms of being in touch with creation. And the peace that is in creation. And you know, creation does need healing as much as people do, and that's part of the tantric tradition, and that's core in this passage too. So even though there doesn't necessarily have anything messianic about the tantric tradition at all, there's still plenty in this passage that speaks to it and around it.
I think the key, if we identify Jesus with this figure, that doesn't exhaust the passage, that there's more.
Oh, exactly. That's a really good way of putting
exactly.
it.
Yes, that's right.
That's
the problem. We tended to identify Jesus with the figure, and that's exhausted the passage. That's all it's got to say, whereas it's got much more to say. More people. That's just one.
If we do that, we just look smug.
Yes.
It's a horrible thing to be.
But also the Jewish lectionary just identifying it with deliverance and liberation and, you know, freedom, you know, which we don't, because our lectionary just reduces it to 10 verses, whereas the Jewish lectionary has, you know, the bits before and the bits after, and then they get something wider in it.
It'd be quite nice to have another Jewish person on to talk to us.
Yeah, I know, I will do it, I promise you. Every time I know, I promise you I will do it.
I'll keep on.
keep nagging, keep nagging. Una, it's really lovely to have you, even though we haven't seen you.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has just been so fascinating. I'm going to look up last week's Bible class. I know you said that it's uploaded to YouTube.
Last week I forgot to record it.
Oh, okay. No problem.
There are other ones. That was my fault completely, and fortunately it's not online, but I got told off at the end of the session.
That's it.
And here's a man who told me off.
Yes, he's still here.
Hope you'll join us again.
Yes, please do.
I will.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.